This episode is proudly brought to you by the ELXA, lifedoers.com, with special thanks to the Botswana Horticultural Council, Bohoku, as well as Mochas Kwalzeng. We are the doers, the doing that makes a difference in life. Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the ELXA Chat with Pros. I'm Laura. This week we're talking food security, all things horticulture. If you're an aspiring horticulturist, this is the place to be. As always, I'm not flying solo. What would an ELXA Chat with Pros be without a guest host? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Mpomolokwe.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for inviting me once again to the ELXA Chat with Pros today.
Thank you so much for being here. On today's chat, we'll be unpacking our guest's personal and professional life, as well as issues faced in his field, such as the policy that has been put in place by the government to ban imports on certain vegetables and its impact on production. Should the ban be lifted, are we in a position to compete with the imports and meet the demand? We will also chat about the quality of the produce on our shelves, as well as pricing, supply of inputs such as pesticides, seedlings, fertilizers, etc., the relationship that they have as farmers with retailers, and other channels being explored. Lastly, we will talk solutions. What solutions can be implemented to mitigate some of these issues, according to him? Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Mokhomotsi Moatsi.
Thank you. Laura?
Erra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you so much. Our guest today should be the ambassador of the University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, as he has obtained not one, but 3 qualifications from the institution. A diploma in agricultural science, Bachelor of Science, as well as his Master in Crop Science, Crop Protection. Our guest is a former plant protection officer at the Ministry of Agriculture, chairman of the Botswana Horticulture Council, amongst many accomplishments he has. Our guest has given up his 9-to-5 completely to focus solely on his agricultural quest to feed the nation. Mr. Moatsi, if you could give us a brief background of yourself, if you could kindly tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Laura. I am Mokhomotsi Moatsi, as you said, and I am a graduate of Botswana College of Agriculture, formerly, now Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And I started my qualifications in 2000. I did my diploma directly from my senior school, and that has been my calling. I reckon, because I had many offers from the University of Botswana and for bachelor's degrees, and I chose my diploma at the Botswana College of Agriculture then to do general agriculture, which normally is extension work for improving farmers' production skills. And I went on to pursue my bachelor's degree at the Botswana College of Agriculture then again, and further did my master's in crop protection. And I've been working in the Ministry of Agriculture since 2006. I worked in the Chobe district with the Panamatenga farmers. There I was helping them to control pests, training them on how to do that. And also I did a lot of biosecurity where we are facilitating trade. I worked with the Australians to establish the plant protection offices that are in Sibili, the consultants who were actually transforming the plant protection to be what it is today. And in 2018, I decided that I wanted to do farming full time because of the interest that I've always had, and also to try to have an impact on the outside of work, outside work. Yeah, so that's how I went into horticulture eventually.
Oh, lovely. So has horticulture to be more specific, has it always been a big part of your life growing up, perhaps?
Yes, actually, I stayed with my grandfather at the cattle post when I was still very young. My mom was working very far from home, and I grew up at the cattle post. And during those times, we would talk with my grandfather that because he was also a farmer, He was a pastoral farmer and also a an arable farmer. So we used to plow for people using his cattle during the Arab times. If you remember the Aldeb, we would plow, and he was paid for plowing for other people. And that's where my interest came. And I thought, you know what? If maybe we could do this better, we could obviously use this as a livelihood, because during those times my grandfather would kill one beast and he would, sponsor all his children to go back to school, to go back to their work. And I thought this just need to be improved a little bit, and this can be a livelihood. And that's what I have grown up to love from my childhood.
It can be commercialized, and you saw it
Yes,
fitting.
yes. Yeah.
Go on that path. Okay. So what would you say is the one thing you wish you would have known before you started your career in agriculture?
Actually, the one thing that I could have known, yeah, probably was the environment. Actually, the environment, it was never the same as what we used to read. I think we were more of a diamond country than an agricultural country, or we were more onto livestock than on the crop production side of things. And yeah, and our support has always been on the livestock sector, and probably because of the export from the beef. And I could have known that the environment is not that suitable, because you would plow your crops and run around with them and start selling on your own, and that has made it a bit of a hassle when I got into this field of horticulture.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good one. And your biggest lesson you've learned thus far?
Yeah, my biggest lessons are that you can go all the way with your qualifications, but you always need experience, and experience is very different from academics. It,
Definitely.
it's a reality, really.
It's that is theory, and now you're practicing in real life.
Yes, yes.
So that was the biggest lesson that you learned, that what you learned in school isn't necessarily what is happening on the ground.
Exactly. When you go to the ground, you actually practice the demography, you experience the reality of things. You actually do, and it doesn't turn out to be in the format that it is written on the book. The last thing that is written on the book could be the first thing that happens on the ground.
Yeah. All right. Well, fair enough. And how easy was it for you to access the market? I mean, you spoke of farming with your grandfather, which was more of a pastime, and then you decided to commercialize it and turn it into a business. How easy or difficult was it for you to penetrate the market?
It was never easy, because the market of horticulture, if you remember well, it has been overwhelmed by imports, and imports have been seemingly cheap to to our market, given that the production in those countries that we are importing from has been supported in a long time, and farmers have been able to stabilize and eventually have to produce more to get more, and hence the prices were seemingly low because of the output that they are able to produce in their farms. But in our case, you start first by trying to access the market. So you do a small area that forces you to want to sell at a much higher price, which was mostly outcompeted by what was coming into the country. And you remember that in Botswana we don't produce any inputs or resources that are needed in production. Therefore, all the inputs that we use are imported, and they come with a price tag. And normally, you try by all means to encompass them in your production costs. And eventually, your production costs become a little bit high, hence, even the price of selling is affected.
Yeah. I think which also brings us to the issue of the policy that has been put in place by the government to burn certain
Yeah.
vested minerals into the country, and how it has affected production. Mr. Mpomolokwe, do you have a few words on that?
Yeah, I could chip in there, Remo, to specifically talk about we know the government with its policy is really trying to support horticulture farmers. And we did see it putting out there the policy of banning import of the other vegetables that we are talking about. In your view, what has been your experience now since the ban as a farmer individually and also as a collective? We do know you're part of the Botswana Horticulture Council, so maybe you could just give us a good view as to how things are, the things that you're currently battling with, and how it's progressing as it stands.
Yes, a bold move indeed. It was a bold move, and one should applaud government for being brave and taking such a decision to protect its farmers or her farmers. And it only needs to be coupled with supporting mechanisms, and supporting mechanisms would mean most of us are we are smallholder farmers, and you'll recall that smallholder farmers will be maybe from a zero point 0.5 hectares to up to 5 to 10 hectares. And in that area, you cannot be able to supply or consistently supply a particular market, alone. And this is normally overpowered by commercial farmers who would farm on 50 hectares to 100 hectares, who are able to get into a market and they are able to supply in a long time. So if you supply maybe a month and you are not able to go on, whoever comes in will close you out. And all I'm saying is the small farmers, in most cases, they are supported by uh, bringing their products together or coming together. If you, for example, have 5 hectares and 100 farms, it's actually 500 hectares. And in that case, you can easily plan on what products you can produce on the 500 hectares so that you can sustainably, feed the market. And this is the power of, working together in more especially smallholder farmers. And I've realized that, more as the policy is here, we didn't think much on how do we support the smallholders when they come together, because we are unable to have pack houses, for example, on our own. You can't do a pack house, and it will be very, very uneconomical to have a 1 hectare and a pack house. And if you have 5 hectares by 100, there could be a pack house that is covered, that is meant to service these 500 hectares in a particular locality. And these 500 hectares can be able to export the products that are coming from it to the rest of the country. And if we have those around the country, and we will have inter export, that is export within the country first, where if the tomato is produced in the Chobe, for example, it is going to be exported to the rest of the country. And if we are able to produce cucurbitates or mahapu, watermelons in a particular area, we do that, and do butternuts and all that, and export to the rest of the country. And if we are able to, have those in bulk, and we can store them over a long time and release them slowly into the market so that at least the market is sustained. And this is what a lot of countries, Malawi, they have done. Farmers produce and they take the product somewhere where the products can be standardized, sorted, pegged, or even processed so that the market can easily reach them. I think that is what was missing in the policy. If the policy could, bring in collection sites where the farmer could reduce the distance to the market, and probably feed into a bigger collection point where this collected could now be exported to the rest of the country. And besides, when we import from exporting countries like South Africa, our retailers are able to drive to Joburg to collect those products. But if the products are collected in Lerala, for example, it will be even shorter for these retailers to go to Lerala and get what they want in Lerala. And if there's anything else in Kgalagadi, they can go to Kgalagadi within the country, and we can sustainably, support government in this initiative of closure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you raised a very pertinent issue regarding the formulation of policy and how effective it is, and how, as the stakeholders in that particular policy, get to be affected by the policy, and later on its effectiveness in achieving what it's set out to do.
Yeah.
Maybe we could maybe just talk about that for another few minutes, just to say, what mechanisms have you got in place? Here we are. We have a good policy. You've expressed the good intentions that the government had in closing the borders, which is good and commendable. And you've went on to outline the shortcomings of the particular policy that was put in place. In this case, how do you is that through the Bohoko that you get to influence policy even right from the when it starts? Then afterwards we can talk about, now that the plane is already in the air and in motion, how do we try and close all the shortfalls that were the shortcomings of the current policy, to quickly be ready for the times when it won't be in place.
Yes. With Bohoko, we are working with FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, because we realize that, okay, horticulture, it's a hanging fruit, really. It's one of the opportunities that the country has, because in horticulture you produce every day, and horticulture products are harvested every day, and they're eaten every day and fresh. So we thought we need to have a strategy of approach, and we requested funds from FAO as Bohoko, and we have drawn the strategy which is now being finalized, and all the stakeholders are expected to show their commitment. Farmers, who are the producers, and government, who is the facilitator, and the consumers, who are the retailers, and the individual consumers. So we think by having a laid down strategy, everyone will know what to do and at what level to start contributing. And we have also talked to FAO to say, but in the strategy there are activities that we don't have money. As Botswana Horticulture Council is a non-profit making organization, actually our purpose is to make sure that whatever policies that are coming from government, we are able to communicate them to the farmer, who is as far as Shakawe, who is as far as Chelsea, who is as far as we are able to give them the light on what it is expecting us as farmers to do. And normally, whenever we have to do that, we need to be getting finance from all those who are supporting us. And this is what we are actually trying to do. We also encouraging on the legislation, like you are saying. With the Botswana Meat Commission, there is a legislation to that effect, which protects collection and distribution of beef in Botswana. And that also goes a long way into horticulture. The same, criteria that is used by BMC is what should be actually, reciprocated to horticulture, so that even the price is not as inconsistent as it is today, because now you have to go to the retailer, and the retailer will tell you a price, and you find that you can be 5 supplying the same retailer and you have different prices. And this is at the detriment of the farmer, because production costs are almost the same, and if you are selling at different prices, basically it's a question of who will sustain that low price for a long time. Normally, we even close our farms because probably the price is not even covering the cost of production. So with a collection center and legislations, you find that you get the same price as farmers, and later on the products are now added value, and they are graded such that the collection center will start making its running costs from. But the farmer, you are sure that every farmer is getting value for their money, and this is where we are actually trying to drive government to say, but if we were to legislate such that everybody who eats products from the horticulture is sure of their credibility, that is the health part, and also they are sure of that's both plant health and human health, that's food safety. So if we have collection points, as government, you can always be confident to say my farmers are producing things that are pesticide free. You will recall recently we had a potato issue when we tried to export because there were some residues that were found, and it's not good for the country. If we were to produce and have all the products safe for consumption, then the farmer will be saved by that particular clause. Just for safety will protect both the farmer and the consumer.
Yeah, I think you bring out a very interesting topic, the issue of quality. I mean, the naysayers, when we did this, when the closures of borders was done, when the ban of imports was done, the naysayers in Botswana talked about quality and said, with the local producers here, with the local farmers, can they match the quality that we need? And well, to some extent, they were right. The products that we saw in the shelves in the first instances were really of below par quality. And some of it is what you see with the eye, and the other bits is the ones that you're talking about, like issues of residues, pesticides on the actual product that is there. I am a bit of an optimist myself, and I would want to hear it from you to say the quality road as you're traveling it from the point where well you were protected as in from other suppliers from outside. What extent have you improved that as a collective, as farmers in Botswana, in terms of the horticulture products?
Yes, like I said, quality also goes with incentive, and in most cases, our products are bought as bulk products. And when you take a product to the shop, they don't even care how you have sorted it. When it comes, they just collect it and sell it, and they are eager to do that because the price is low normally when they buy it from us. But as we said, if you are incentivized to produce, if for example you say grade A is attracting 15 pula, grade B is attracting 10 pula, and grade 3 grade C is attracting 5 pula, then the farmer actually is improving his quality to get the 15 pula from the grade A. But in our case, even if you want to produce a better product than Moachi's product, they're still going to attract the same price. It is different in our neighboring countries where we're getting our imports. They have standardization procedures. They have collection points. The ones that I'm talking about every day, they have them. When the products get there, they are sorted into qualities. And whenever a retailer comes to buy, they choose the quality that they want from all the quality. Because when you get to Moachi's farm, you will find quality 1, quality 2, quality 3 in the same farm. But if I were to harvest, because although that product I want to be bought, I will just harvest it as one product. And if I was taken to a collection point where all those process standardization I was talking about happens, then they were going to sort them out into different qualities. And besides, I think now there's a great difference because we are consistently supplying. Previously, you would supply, and when the import comes, you stop supplying. Once you stop supplying, it means the pests and diseases will attack your crop because you are not harvesting them. But now there's no chance of having a product that can remain in the farm maybe for a longer time, and this obviously is going to add up into our quality. And for me, I think what I've observed so far, the quality has improved. Just that we are still, not able to consistently supply the market. I think that is my only worry, and this is because farmers are still, fearing that if I tell Moachi that I have tomato, then Moachi is going to outcompete me. But farmers are not supposed to compete, and the government should understand that. Farmers are supposed to complement each other. Once you have farmers, you should make sure that you avoid competition as much as possible so that production could be equalized. And eventually, you should have farmers who are producing the same quality that you are looking, or you envisage in the production line.
Do we have a grading system currently for horticulture produce?
Actually, we have standards. We have standards
Okay.
that have been made. Yeah, but they are optional standards. They are involuntary standards, and this is
Okay.
where we come in.
Okay.
Yes,
Is it
this is where we come in. Yeah,
by
yeah,
boss?
by
Okay.
Bobs.
So
Yes, yes, yes.
okay. So we currently, and then you're saying they're not compulsory, so we pick and choose whether we want to. I mean, it's a very a good point. I was listening to you as you were talking to say, you're linking quality with the incentive that you get for producing that quality. And I think having had the exposure with so many other industries, which agriculture industries, even with pork or other ones, even with beef, well, there's always that issues around the grading system and how you reward different quality with different prices. So I think it's as the Bohoko and also with other stakeholders, something that is worth pursuing. Now that we've traveled this road of at least enabling local production to be consistent, at the production to happen around, I think maybe the next step would be to try and see how now we grade, so that we have. I mean, without mentioning names, we do know supermarkets here in Botswana that are renowned for their good quality, and the other ones that are on the other extreme. So if we have that grading, and the ones that are that are known for good quality are ready to pay premium prices, so yeah, that would help to really reward that good quality that is given. So I think it's a good point that you've raised. And if we look at, say, if they with this policy, when it's supposed to when what's to be reviewed, was it a 3 year or 2 year policy?
It's 2 years. Our horticulture industry, if you look at it, this policy that they instituted is actually in line with the WTO, agreement. The
Yeah.
WTO agreement on safeguards actually is they're safeguarding an infant industry. Our
Yes.
industry in horticulture in Botswana is assumed to be infant, and
Yes.
the infancy normally comes to an end, and it is also there in the safeguard agreement of the WTO. So normally it's a maximum of 2 years. Then you should showcase what you have done as a system to say I've closed, but this is what I've done to improve, my sector. And this is where I'm coming in to say, but if we were to, hurry into making these collection centers and storing our products to protect the farmers, you'll be mindful that we have ratified the African Area Free Trade Agreement, and it's something that is going to expose us if we are left like this. And if the 2 years comes to an end, then obviously the African free trade will take over. But if we had protected our farmers by way of collecting and starting to add value to their products, then obviously we would compete easily in African free trade. And everybody is going to be free to bring their products to Botswana if we don't have any standards in Botswana that will say our standard is here. The only product that we are going to take should be matching our standard in Botswana. And that is what can protect us during that African Free Trade Agreement. And this is where we are saying, I think what is left now is only this, standardization where everybody knows that I will only eat a horticulture product that has passed through this process. And
Yes.
if that process is there, anything that comes into Botswana as well is going to be exposed to the same grading system. And it
So
might
in
be
that
a
way,
bit expensive.
yeah. So in that way, you avoid dumping of of products that are substandard to Botswana as well.
Exactly. Exactly, which I think has been the case. And these imports that we've been getting, they actually have not been of good quality. We've been getting oranges that you were finding on the streets. Most of them you'll find with scales, brown scales, and they were not coming from Botswana. But we have not never complained about that quality because it was coming from somebody else. And I think if we have a grading standard, then we are not in a position to live or to expose ourselves to such. And besides, horticulture, you remember that in 2016 we had tuta absoluta, or a pest that came with tomatoes. And if we don't have those standards, exporting countries to us are going to export products that are, can expose us to pest outbreaks. And this is where we say government should now come into play and close in and say whatever that comes into Botswana should be, protecting my local farmer. And these are the collection
Biosecurity.
points.
So it's
Biosecurity.
biosecurity management is
Yeah.
okay. Great. I think you've outlined yesterday the impacts of the policy as it is and the protection that can be given, given the infancy level of the local production. I think now we can also look at, apart from the production protection that can be given by the government, we also have to look at how, as small farmers, earlier on you talked about how most of the horticulture farmers are operating anything from 0 to 5 hectares, and they are in many numbers. And the best way would be for them to collaborate. I think I would like us to really dwell on the business side of things, to say, sometimes when you're running a production led business, it's usually a numbers game, yes, but sometimes the constraint is you only have limited production capability there, so you can't really play with numbers as big as someone who is, say, sitting on 30 or even more hectares. In your view, those small farmers, or maybe let's just look at the business side of things to say how can they get around, try and make the business fundamentals work for them. And the big business fundamentals in this case, we'll just look at the cost and revenue, the cost of inputs, as in with a small farmer getting to acquire those, and just the revenue, maximizing those, selling their produce in the end. In your view, what are the business dynamics there, especially for small farmers, and how can they be made to work for that farmer?
Yes, small farmers should start knowing each other. We should, in any locality, we should start coming together, sitting down together, and making our plans together. If we don't make our plans together, then we are subject to lose, because I'll do my tomato and the other guy will do the same date he will do his tomato, and when our tomato is ready, it is going to be ready at the same time, and we are going to fight for a very limited market in that way. But if we were to say in our demographic locations, we need to know each other and know the suitable crops that we can produce. Then we can give each other a date. For example, if we say this month we're having 500 hectares, like I was giving an example of 5 hectares times 100. If we're having 500 hectares, we could say, okay, this month we are going to be doing tomato in our 10 hectares. 10 hectares will be 2 hectares from Moachi, 2 hectares from farmer X, and 2 hectares from another 5 farmers who do the first 10 hectares. Then maybe the next month again, we do another 10 hectares of the same crop, like you're saying, numbers of the same crop, because we know this crop is all going to be absorbed by the market. Once we have that crop in play, the other district will produce a different crop from what we have produced, obviously. And here we can now start communicating as farmers, doing what I was referring to say we should have internal export and import. Because if I'm in Gauteng district, for example, and we are producing a lot of cabbages because it's cold, then we can export cabbages to those areas that are warm. And in those areas that are warm, say the Ngamiland and the Chobe, they can produce in winter crops that are suitable for summer because it's normally warm throughout the year. Then they can export those one in winter to all those countries that get frost during this winter period. And if we were to be able to communicate like that, and farmers not hiding themselves from each other, and there's no need to compete now because the market is just there. We have school feeding program, we have prisons, we have hospitals. Those markets we can, once we collect ourselves, we can easily tell government that we can sustainably feed these people. The products are there. And it is the power in the farmer that will now give government no choice but to change into what we want government to assist on. But if we are still standing on our individual farms, it is very difficult to talk of the numbers game, because you are going to be forced to put in onions, tomatoes, so that at least each market you are able to get something from, and it is not
That actually
sustainable.
reminds me of the cropping plan that has been talked about for a while now. What's the latest on that? Has it been put in place? Is it still an idea, or have we blown life into it? Also, as Bohoku, I believe that you're the relevant entity to encourage farmers to pull in one direction and work together. If you could kindly shed light on the matter, just your current stance as Bohoku,
Yes,
and also the cropping plan. How's that coming along?
yes. Let me tell you something. You know the current situation is working for the retailers. How so? It's working for them because they can fix the price. And normally, when the price of tomato is 26 pula per kg in the shops, it is still 8 pula per kg at the farm level. That is the truth.
Yes.
And we actually don't benefit from these shortages. When they say that the product is in short supply, we only sell at the same price the whole year. But the
Okay.
shops are the ones that are going to be feeling the demand and supply, kind of behavior. So that they're benefiting from that. So whenever we try to come together, they make sure that they have a formula to keep us out of this group, so it's the associations. They make sure when they offer a better price just for that particular time, so that farmers can be derailed. And it is a very difficult, Botswana Horticulture Council, running Botswana Horticulture Council is very difficult in that line. And, we're having a tough call. And normally, what we try to tell the farmers is we have the power. We can stop production. We can stop supplying individually and tell these guys that we are only going to be able to supply you as an association. And a farmer cannot, because we actually are not making that much money now. A farmer doesn't want to stop until that is achievable, because the product is dying in the farm. So you find that we have those farmers who can agree to sacrifice, and those farmers who feel I need to sell. So as you are collecting other farmers are running behind you and are going to supply those chain shops. And also there is an issue of, if you can tell farmers to bring to you as Bohoko and you are not able to pay them outright, the shops will start, shortening the times of paying their farmers. And somebody will continue, what is the use of me going to Bohoko because they don't have money? So I'm going to the shop because now they are paying in 2 weeks and no longer paying 3 months. Because these shops, they can take up to 3 months without even paying you your monies. But ever since, the closures, they are trying to always figure out how to keep their suppliers to them. And this is the difficulty we are faced with. So this thing, like I'm saying, in other governments, and if you look at the WTO dispensation, Article 5, biosecurity and science-based risk analysis, protect the farmers normally, and it's a fight that you don't win that easily. Although, yes, now farmers are realizing, okay, running behind other farmers is not working for us, because, these retailers still take advantage of us.
Yeah, I mean, you predicted one of the questions I was going to ask you. The whole value chain, right from the production of the horticulture products to the point where the consumer enjoys those products. I wanted to give me your view in terms of the power of the stakeholder and the players in the value chain.
Is the retailers. In extension, what I learned is that, when you start teaching, giving people a new product, there are 5 categories. Some are innovators, some are early adopters, some are adopters, and some are late adopters, and they are laggards. And these are the 5 groups of people who you will find in the farming community. The innovators, when you tell them immediately, or when we come together, we can win this or war, they will come. And some are waiting to see the innovators win. and they are sitting back, just sitting back a little bit. Those are the early adopters. They are sitting back a little bit. If the innovators win, they come running. And the other ones are just watching to say, bale bone they are ba ipolella gore ba bothata. So they are just waiting for it. Everything should be, perfect. And this is the group of farmers that you end up dealing with. So you find that you have a few farmers who buy in to the fact that we can come together and make a difference. And some feels, I've been consistently supplying those guys and the devil that I know. And you find that it is a very difficult call to bring all these people to believe on the ideas that you are bringing to them immediately. And we are working with that. All we are saying is that for those farmers who feel they have had enough, let's come together and show these retailers that we are the ones who are producing. And we are not saying they cannot determine the price, but we can determine the price. We and the retailer, we need to agree and say, this is my cost of production and this is the price that I'm willing to buy at. But what do we meet in between?
The views and opinions expressed on this chat are that of the individuals and do not necessarily represent or reflect the views and opinions of any of the entities they represent or affiliated to. It's such a shame, really, now that you've mentioned it. As we've seen prices go up with different vegetables, especially tomatoes on retailers' shelves, one would think that the reason for the fluctuation and the different prices always is because of the supplier. Now, having learned this, it's truly a shame, So in essence, the dynamic of supply and demand is only enjoyed by the retailers and not the farmers.
Yes. I think you realize with the beef, the BMC will release prices, average prices. So the farmer will know that ideally this month the price is ranging between this and this. Even if you drop 2 puller downwards, you are still within the range. And some will even offer you 2 puller up on top of what the BMC has released, so that they incentivize such that you can run to them. In that case, you find that the farmer is protected. Actually, I think we are expecting a lot from farmers. That is my belief, because a farmer should be producing. Actually, a farmer should concentrate on their production and bring to the market and go back to production.
Yes.
And there should be somebody who takes over from storage and distribution. It's a value chain. That's creation of employment. If I were to produce and sell and process as a farmer, I think you're expecting too much from us. That's actually what I think. In South Africa, when when you want to farm, and when you are, even if you are a black farmer, there is what we call black farmer empowerment, and they get you by your hand and tell you that, okay, we want you to fit into this production. This is what we are running short of. Can you do watermelons, for example? Then you see a farmer, always a policy is waiting for a farmer to come forth and sacrifice. It's a big sacrifice to be a farmer, and people don't realize that. Whenever frost hits in your farm, it doesn't hit the country's economy. It hits on individual's farm's economy. And no one comes to you and say, frost, you had a problem of frost, because even insurance, it's still unsure as to whether to insure horticultural products or not, given the dynamics that comes up with the horticulture, sector.
Okay, great. I think we can talk about, now that you've talked about insurance and all those. An industry is supported by the different players, financiers being one. You could maybe also elaborate on that, the access to finance for small farmers, horticulture farmers, and how good is that? And sometimes they're different kind of finances. Maybe sometimes they'll be supporting more like your working capital and enabling you to do the production for a year. All those. How is your experience as far as financing and access to it is concerned?
Yeah, I think government has worked so hard on financing the sector. Finance is not much of an issue to me now, and finance to production to me is not a priority now. I think priority is, where do I take those products after being financed? That is my concern.
Yes.
If we could have that, because like you were rightfully saying, we had ISPAD, which was financing horticulture farmers, and some of them now, the nets are just lying there because they produced and there was no way to take their products to. And you can increase production as much as you want, but if absorption of the production is still a question, then financing production to me it's a question mark. All I'm saying is we could be concentrating now between the farmer and the consumer. How is the movement of products from here? Because you can even do it from your pocket if the market is there. You can even do it from your backyard if the market is there. The backyard idea that we had a long time back could have worked if we had, the marketing aspect of things was, in order. But the problem is that we don't. It is not in order. You can produce whatever you produce, and it's surprising. The tomato that we are saying is not there now. In February, January, it was being given to ghosts, and now there's nothing in the shops.
Why was
But
that so? Was it because between yourselves and the retailers you couldn't agree on a price and they couldn't uptake your tomato?
not really. Ghana, if you don't have collection point, you don't have standardization. The retailers realize that anything that comes from a farm can make profit. What they do, they have their farms now because they know you just take from the garden to the consumer. It is not a problem in Botswana. And they have their farms. So whatever quality that is coming from their farm gets into their shelves, whether it is bad quality or whatever, then it is associated with Botswana farmers. You see, so it's a question of if you don't have standardization, you find that everything that comes is a bad name to the farmers. But if, they can even produce more tomato that is enough for their farm. So I'm left with my product that now I have to go in on the streets to try to make it absorbed. And eventually, if they are producing for themselves, eventually it means their prices could go even lower. But they won't do that because they're the ones who are producing. They supply themselves with a good price and sell at a high price because they know I don't have a choice. If they are closed in their market, I don't have a choice. But like we say, if farmers were able to realize this thing, come together and access other markets, markets like because government has given us market where institutions. And if we could come together and realize the power that we have as farmers, eventually the retailers were going to come to us to ask us to supply them. But at least for now, we are not realizing the strength that we have as individual farmers.
Okay, so you're saying apart from the channel of using retailers who reach the consumers, there are also supplying institutions, something that is open to you that you can explore in order to obviously get more of your products bought, and in the process also accumulate. They say money is power. Accumulate those funds that will enable you to even push your weight around and do other things that you need to
Exactly.
do. And sometimes I see, there'll be products available from the hawkers around, but not in supermarkets. Do you hold in any high regard the hawkers, or is it just an informal channel that can't really help you? Is it not one that you also explore of trying to reach the final customer with many informal suppliers or retailers in the form of hawkers?
Yes, actually, that is the idea that we are trying to do. We are trying by all means to make sure that these retailers should come to us. Normally, because the hawkers will pay you outright. And
Yes.
this is the market that we are satisfying for now. We are trying to say if we can supply our hawkers, at least that the customer is going to have the product at the end of the day. And most of us now, we are able to have hawkers who come directly to our farms and get products and they sell on the streets. And you are able to say no. Maybe you are even able to say I don't have a product because it is being sold by the hawkers. It is a very good and it's an alternative market that we could use to drive our point home and have the local markets that are powerful, that are competing with the retailers. If every Motswana could know that when I go to Basrank, I'll get all the products, then I don't think we have any issue with the retailers in that case. I think that is what actually we are driving home as we speak. And as we go around our horticulture association, we are also talking to councils to support our associations to absorb our products. But seems now everything is in place. The council they are willing to support farmer groups, and we have done well in the southern district. We are supplying schools, so the farmers are cooperating in supplying schools, and we want to cascade it to the rest of the country so that farmers could know that alternative to the retailers, we have a big market that we might as well not even be able to satisfy schools, hawkers, and we can even from there go into the tourism sector and talk to the tourism sector on how we can easily collaborate so that at least at the end of the day, if there's no legislation, we are able to make our point to the retailers.
How's NAPRO, the vegetable processing that's I think in Peakway? Is it still achieving its mandate, or what's going on with it there?
NAPRO, we have approached NAPRO, and normally the statements are very unclear. I think they will be in a better position to answer for themselves. They are normally, NAPRO is not there. We have talked to them when we tried to open the Robertson market to say, can you be our market? But I don't think NAPRO is actually operational for now. I've not heard much from the NAPRO. We were in Peakway with Spedu in last month, trying to get how we can relate with Spedu as Bohoko. And we asked about NAPRO, but I don't think NAPRO is that active and willing to come to farmers as of now.
Okay, great. I think with any efforts to grow a value chain industry, we always look at the different players and how what they call the multiply effect, and the fact that you empower one player, how it empowers the other. I would like to hear from you for the inputs, the guys who would provide inputs like seeds and seedlings, fertilizers, and all those. How has been this for all this chat today? We centered around the closure of the borders because it's a main thing. Obviously, it's one of the main interventions that were there that have been there in place lately. I just want to hear from you to say how has the that's impacted input providers? Are we seeing new providers of seeds and seedlings around, fertilizer producers, all those things? Is it happening that way, or are we still importing still?
Yeah, we're importing almost all our seed. And seedlings, yes, there are players who have come on board the farmers who are now, concentrating on seedling production, whom we are actually supporting as a council. And our only challenge is that once you are still inputting the primary source of life, that is seed, obviously the cost is going to be determined by how much the seed is coming at. So we still feel in a biosecurity setup, we shouldn't be buying seed, which is a primary cause of inoculum in most cases. It brings a lot of diseases. We should be able to tell Seedco, for example, to say there are farmers here. It's a market, actually. It's a market on its own to the farmers. If they are protected by the way of legislation, eventually this seed production will be, contracting local farmers to produce seeds for them. In Kenya, you don't bring in seed like it is brought in Botswana. You only bring, germplasm or just a small portion of seed. They are using the international standard for seed testing, and you bring that, then they multiply in the country. The people who multiply are the farmers, and it is a market for the farmers. So this is why we say, in a situation like this, we need to be holistic. We need to sit down and say, but how can we benefit? How can all of us leverage from this dispensation of border closure? And once these companies are aware that the government wanted them to produce seed locally to protect its environment, its agricultural environment, obviously, and then they will obviously be compelled to come to farmers and start producing seeds with the local farmers. And we still find ourselves with high input prices because we are importing most of the seeds. Seedlings, I think most of the farmers who are producing seedlings are able to supply us, consistently.
Great. We say sometimes we want to, we do these agricultural activities to uplift ourselves economically and to, get to prosper. We do know, in terms of if you, a person who looks at, the economic metrics and all that, how the agriculture for a long time went or down, and its inputs as a contribution to the GDP went down. I would see, well, I'm an optimist, like I said earlier. I see us now reviving agriculture, but they sometimes say, in order to feed the village, you must empower the woman. How has the participation of women in your industry, how has it improved throughout the years? Is it something that you're actively supporting, or it's one man for himself, God for us all?
Yes, I mean, okay. My observation with horticulture is that it's more like it's women led. Horticulture, you don't need to overemphasize the woman participation in it, and you don't even need to marginalize and say a woman and a man. Because with my experience, even when I was still an extension officer, the person you find at the farms will be women, and it is actually women who are doing it, which is my the center of my argument to say we need to protect these people because they're the seed of the country. And if an industry like this is easy accessible by our mothers, then we need to support it, blindly, because they are the people who are a source of life. So I think, to me, it doesn't even have to be, I don't need to say how I need to support women, because
Yeah.
I am here for women mostly.
Okay, so we don't have to go out of our way to support because it's already happening. Naturally, it is happening. I get your explanation. Laura, just as we approach the closure of our, maybe another 5 minutes or so of our chat, 5 to 10. From your side, did you want to? Is there any questions you wanted to pose to Ramuatsu today?
Listen, I've been trying to chime in. I don't know if there's something wrong with my mic or what's going on here. Tomati, please allow me to take you back. You mentioned the importance of farmers coming together for a common goal. How realistic do you think this is to supply in large numbers? Listen, I'm a very big advocate of working together and collaborations and so forth. So I just want to hear from you. How realistic do you think this is?
Say again, you say how
farmers to come
realistic?
together and work together as a collaborative.
Yeah, it actually that's the only formula. Actually, that's the only formula. When you talk of smallholder farmers, there's no way a smallholder farmers can sustainably supply a market. There's no way. Actually, because if your area is so small to hold a crop, then it will hold a crop only to its life expectancy, and from there you will have to plant another crop again and wait the 2-3 months before the crop is ready. Who is supplying the market in these 3 months? So this is where that's where the power of coming together comes into play, and there's no choice, because in any case, if we are together, whenever my crop is still recovering, I know farmer B crop is on the market, on the shelf, and the farmer B crop is recovering. My crop is back on the shelf, and the other farmer is already ready for the market. When we are spraying, farmer C is supplying, and that's the power of coming together. We can supply a market every day with a product that is coming from three farmers, and it will seem as if it's coming from only one farmer. The McCain story. You can just find the McCain story. The guy who supplied green pepper to McCain was only producing 5 hectares, and he gathered, farmers to make up to 30 hectares. Then they sustainably supplied McCain with green pepper because the tender was his. He managed to collect those farmers so that they can sustainably, supply. So it cannot be overemphasized, really.
No, teamwork really does make the dream work. So it's very important. I think it also made me sad when you mentioned that farmers don't have, they're not the key players or they don't control the market. I found it very sad, and I said, if we came together as a collective, we would have a better standing and also having a fair share in the market. So yeah, just working together is so important.
Yeah, that's the first thing, really.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as we come to a close, do you have any last words, Mr. Moatsi? Or perhaps what's next for you? What are you currently working on, and what can we look forward to?
Actually, what we are working on is we are trying to lobby in partners because, like I said, we need players. Even if we were to have investors who can come and say, okay, we can have a collection point with you. We are going 50-50. We are bringing in capital. And if my farmers could be paid outright, my farmers are going to produce. Let me be honest with you. If we can have money enough to say if a farmer delivers today, he's paid his money today, then the farmer is going to go back and buy seed. The farmer is going to go back and buy pesticide. But if we are still, supplying cascoloto or supplying fresh produce, cascoloto, it is not working for the farmer because you can't spray, you can't fertilize, and eventually the quality, you cry foul of the quality as the market again because you're not giving back the money. And normally when they're saying the quality is poor, they're still holding on our money. That is unfortunate.
Which is such a shame.
Yes.
Okay, well, we hope that everything comes together beautifully. Mr. Molokwe?
I express my appreciation and gratitude to Remoatsu and to Kip to say keep up the good work that you're doing. It's for the greater good of the country. Let's just see how food security is maintained, how we able to produce products that are the first one, the primary ones that ensure we leave, which is food. So with that, I'd say thank you for the chat today. I'll hand over to Laura, then she can do the close.
Yes, Mr. Moati, it's been an absolute pleasure, honestly. I don't think that will be our last chat with you. It's been eye-opening. It's been informative, insightful. We've been really, really thrilled to hear from you, and I'm sure our listeners also appreciate all the nuggets, the insights that you shared with us today. Thank you kindly for being here with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Molokwe. Thank you, Laura.
Mr. Molokwe, it's been an absolute pleasure as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
as
there
we
you
come
have
to
it.
a close, we would like to extend our gratitude to the Botswana Horticulture Council, Mochas Kwalzing, as well as the ELXA, livedoers.com. And to you, our doers, our listeners, we would like to thank you for tuning in. Till we meet again, same time, same place. I'm Laura, and this is the ELXA Chat with Pros.